So it's from our Six Music classic album of the day, Origin of Symmetry. It is Muse, of course, and that's Newborn, and Dom and Chris from Muse. Welcome to the programme. No, Matt, who I presume has fatherly duties, dad's duties at the moment.
Changing nappies, I think.
Have you given him much advice? You're the experienced man.
Yeah, I have, yeah. Well, I've got 5 and another one on the way as well. So,
have you?
Yeah,
Congratulations.
January, yeah.
Crikey, between you, you're going to have a football team.
I know, yeah. Yeah, there's definitely space for a Muse crash on tour, I think.
Just before we get on to the album, did you ever think there's, or did you ever look back and think there was actually something fated about your band? I mean, just the fact that the three of you, end up randomly all moving and living and growing up in Teignmouth, coming from different parts of the country. I mean, that's against the odds.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, yeah. I mean, it definitely feels like something was written in the stars, I mean, I guess, if you tried to get odds on that at the bookies, they wouldn't be very good. So just the fact we all felt, I guess, a bit like outsiders when we moved down to Devon, we didn't... kids kind of form close friendships when they're young, and develop through school, and we kind of all moved in at an age where those friendships have already been formed. So we were always kind of on the outside of all the groups of friends, So I guess that, in a sense, probably brought us together and inspired us.
It's just weird that you ended up on this odd ley line where all of you was, be in the right place at the right time.
I think most people from our school, most of the people were actually locals, Yeah. I mean, we were from, Chris is from up north, Rotherham, I was from Manchester, and Matt's from Cambridge, and a few of our other friends were, from Cambridge and outside of Devon anyway. So, we just felt like we got together and hung out, I suppose, with that common ground.
Yeah. So let's talk about the album, the making of the record, and we ought to put this into context, really, because no one really remembers that. I mean, even after Muscle Museum first time around, no one in this country, at least, no one wanted to sign you. They really for what seemed like quite a while.
Yeah, so I think it was like the last deal we signed?
England.
Yeah. I think we'd already done. I think the States was the first one, and then Germany, and then France, and a few other places came on board, and then it was probably I think the album was already recorded before Mushroom came on board. Then, so
did you feel a tad unwanted in your own territory?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it was weird, but I think at that point it was exciting as well, though, because I guess most bands kind of start from home.
Yeah,
and we kind of did it the other way around. We went to all these other places before we did anything in England, really. So,
what was it about America? Do you think that where they understood you before people over here did?
I don't know whether maybe they kind of heard a bit of heaviness in there, but at that time, American rock music was very rock, and English rock music was a bit soft, a bit indie. I don't know, maybe they thought we had potential and then realised we didn't for the first album, then we got dropped.
We still had a sore thumb over here, though, because, I guess when we started, it was right on the back end of Britpop, I guess.
Yeah.
So, we weren't in any way close to that musically.
No. So Showbiz comes out, I think it's released October 99, goes to number 29. So from that experience, given that, some of it's already there and then you sort of bolt it all together, but did you learn anything from doing that album which you sort of took on to the next record, whether it was things that you did right or things that you did wrong, that you look back on the first album and thought, actually, we can do this in a different way?
I think going out and touring helped because, I think, between all of us, the one thing we'd probably say about Showbiz is it sounds absolutely nothing like we've ever sounded as a live band. So, we did that album, we went on tour for, 2 years, and I think we had a gap in touring where we went into Ridge Farm Studios for 2 weeks with Dave Bottrell. So we were fully kind of in live mode, and I think we just felt it was really important to get that across on, we did Plug-in Baby and Newborn at that time.
Right.
So I think that was probably the biggest lesson that was learned, was that, things were really building up from playing live. So we tried to take that into the studio and, set up very much as as we would as a 3-piece live band. I think it worked. I think when people heard Plug-in Baby and Newborn for the first time, I think they kind of had a familiar sound to what we were doing on stage.
Yeah, much more representative. It's a shame it was a long time between the album coming out and you getting back into a studio and probably sitting down and recording again. Were you touring all that time then? It was about a year, I think.
I suppose, we must have been. Because we were also touring in Europe as well, but playing tiny little clubs, to 300 people.
Were you headlining these shows at this time, or are you doing still supports in certain places?
We did a couple of random supports in Germany, supporting Bush. Well, we supported the Chili Peppers and the Foo Fighters in America.
Yeah. Here's the other thing, that was along the line, you're picking up a lot of people in bands who really like the band. Anthony Kiedis once crowd surfed to your band, didn't he? That's what I was told.
He came to see us in some tiny little club in New York.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he did that when we were supporting them.
Right. Probably not at one of those gigs, no. But all this graft, were you learning more about the capabilities of the band? I mean, apart from the fact that you wanted to capture the live element of it, was there something where, you're beginning to grow into the band?
I think our Chili Peppers tour was pretty important, because I think at that point we were probably pretty static on stage and pretty self-conscious, and being on a massive arena tour like that, obviously being really young and, seeing the Foo Fighters and seeing the Chili Peppers every night kind of made us realise that we were way behind the mark when it came to getting up on stage and giving people a show. Yeah. To be able to play those kind of venues, which is obviously something we always wanted to do. Yeah. It really opens your eyes when you're, playing to half sold out clubs, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a 20,000 capacity arena with the Chili Peppers. Yeah.
Were you changing at all yourselves? Because I was reading an interview with Matt from 2000, this is, where he said, I've changed absolutely, drastically. I was pretty certain of who I was, and now I've lost all concept of that, and I've started to question everything.
It's difficult to tell at that age, because we were just, we were really young, we were like 19 or 20 when the first album came out, and I think most people at that age change anyway. Yeah. I'm sure it did change in some way. The life that you lead on tours it's a pretty unnatural life as such.
Yeah. I think there was lots of changes there. I can kind of understand what Matt was saying, and we were suddenly travelling around the world. I think every band says it, but you're suddenly travelling around the world, and you're kind of losing contact with where you came from.
So there's nothing stable so much to grab onto.
Yeah. And you're being in a band, the whole thing's very surreal as well. But that kind of feeling of losing contact and losing touch with home is something that a lot of the album is probably about as well.
Matt also said, by the way, in the same interview, that he hadn't bought a CD for 3 years and that everyone should download their music from Napster for free.
I bet he's regretting that one.
Yeah. So having done showbiz, this is the origin of Symmetry. Really is. It's the album where the sort of appetite for experimentation really starts to take a grip, isn't it? Did you realise? Were there no boundaries? You could do anything on this record. Is that the feeling?
Big time, yeah. I think that's why we're kind of choosing to look back on this album now and play it at Reading, and because it's always felt like a very important album, because it's a period where we really started to experiment in the studio, and I suppose the musical influences really became way more diverse. Classical music had suddenly a massive influence on Matt's songwriting. There's more piano involved, and everything just got way more ambitious in the studio.
It sounds like everyone hit their instruments harder as well.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously the touring side. But I think it's also that, it's the first album that we made from scratch as well. Yeah. I think most bands' first albums are, a bit of a compilation of all the stuff you've done since you started. I can remember talking about what songs we were going to record for Showbiz. I think it was a list of 80 songs, of all the songs that we'd written since 1994, some of which were awful and would never have made it to the album, but we were kind of considering everything and just trying to work out what was the best of what we'd done to that point. The vibe of when you do a second album is just very different, because it's like you haven't got anything else to fall back on. It's just like, we've actually got to write an album, a coherent album that works. So I think for that reason, it maybe frees your mind a little bit, because you just feel like, it's a total blank canvas and you can kind of do what you want and experiment in any way that you want.
And that's how it turns out. We'll play a track from it and talk more about our 6 music album of the day today after this. From Muse, this is Space Dementia. The Muse album Origin of Symmetry, it's Space Dementia. We've been playing the tracks from the album today. Some people might be hearing it for the first time. It's really quite unconventional in places.
Extremely, I think so, yeah. Again, it was recorded in a couple of different sections, really, wasn't it? And half of it's Dave Bottrell, half of it's John Leckie. I quite like, I like the Bottrell stuff, On those sessions, they were kind of strange sessions, because we set up like a PA in the studio, literally trying to make it sound like a gig, and then mic up that room. But I think because of that, those particular songs have got quite a cool sound to them.
Yeah. I think the Leckie stuff is where it got pretty dark
and more experimental.
Yeah, definitely more experimental. Songs like Screenager, where bones were coming out, weren't they, for percussion, and because John Leckie's just well up for stuff like that anyway. There's moments where we're just walking around the room, just squeezing bubble wrap and walking over newspaper, and
that's the intro to Screenager. You can hear lots of crackling. It kind of sounds like a fire, like a lovely log fire crackling in the background, but it's actually us walking on bubble wrap.
But we spent more time doing that than we did recording music, I think.
So you always had a career in Radio 4 sound effects. This never works. Looking back on it now, I mean, it sounds obviously that there are different facets, different times when you're making the record. But was it an enjoyable process, or was it quite painful? Because you obviously now have set. I think you've set your standards higher probably for a second album. So there's always that need to be better.
I think it was difficult because, I think at that point there was, there was still a lot of pressure to get the album done quickly so we could get back out on tour again. I mean, there was no real break between Showbiz and that album. I mean, like I said, in between tours we were going in the studio, and then when we stopped touring, we were straight back in the studio. I think, we finished mixing Origin and went on tour the next day. So, there's always that element of feeling rushed, but I kind of feel that that's what made that album what it is. It's kind of got this random, chaotic feel about it, like it's kind of focused but not quite, which is, I guess it's part of its charm. And I don't think it was really until, Absolution maybe where we probably felt comfortable in the studio.